Hello and welcome to the Leaders Council podcast, the podcast for the people who run the country and the people who keep the country running. You join us on yet another sunny day here in the capital. I'm Matthew O'Neill, and today, as always, we ensure that we have a variety of distinct perspectives on leadership. First, we're joined by Emma Ridgeway, Managing Director of Vita Skills, a leading provider in delivering first-class training courses in beauty, children, and youth work and fitness industry. Emma, hello.
Hello.
Thank you for coming on the program today. Now, normally, we like to go straight over to the subject of leadership on this show. But considering the ongoing COVID outbreak, we should discuss that first. Now, how has this affected your operations?
Oh, massively. Obviously, we had to shut our doors back in March, like pretty much like the rest of the country. But with us teaching, we teach a lot of the unemployed and upskill them, ready to get back into work. So obviously, it's had a massive impact on regards to people signing up, our ability to enrol people because we can't have people back in centre. Obviously, there's then been a huge influx in the demand for PPE, which hasn't been able to, there's a lot of places that have sold out of all the necessities, such as, your face masks and your gloves. And then obviously the price of everything is quadrupled. So it has had a massive impact both financially and obviously then is from the student perspective as well, where they really need to sort of get into centre because we're the only people that we sort of have the interaction with. Obviously we can't let them in. So yeah, it's been quite challenging.
Now, Emma, you focus on several different sectors of work. Yeah. However, three of them, the beauty industry, the children and youth work, and the fitness industry, all are industries in which people are in almost intimate contact with people because they're so close.
Yes.
Obviously, with the result of the coronavirus precautions that are being taken, how do you feel that you're going to have to adjust the way in which you train people for the post-corona world?
Well, the majority of, for example, say like the beauty industry, because that's probably, it's just sort of hitting the headlines quite a lot at the moment, is what we're sort of going down the whole the PPE route, so to speak. But there is new qualifications regarding infection control, which is specifically around the COVID-19. So we're in the process now of becoming a registered centre to be able to deliver that to anybody that works within the hair, beauty, retail, within sort of any of them sectors. And there is a specific qualification that will fall, one for retail, one for beauty, one for fitness, and it will one for hairdressing as well. Sorry, and basically we will look at that either funded by the government, which is one of the initiatives that we already do, or it will be a small cost to the individual to pay for their registration and certification fees. So that will be something that we will be lobbying for because it is sort of in its final stages now of being released. The first one that's just been done is the hair and beauty sector, and then the complementary therapies, retail, and I think the customer service are the ones that are due to follow within the next sort of 6 to 8 weeks. So that will obviously massively affect our delivery and the way that we train people moving forward, because we will integrate this as part of good practice, basically, because I do feel that moving forward this will be something that everybody within the industry will need to know and work towards to make sure that the workplace stays as safe as possible.
Do you believe that this is going to have a profound effect on the long term on the way in which these industries behave?
Yes, definitely. I mean, there has been, obviously I'm in a lot of social media groups and things like that, obviously just to make sure that I keep my finger on the pulse with the trends and so to speak. And there's a lot of backlash at the moment for people because a lot of, say for example, within the beauty industry, a lot of people and in the fitness, they're self-employed. And if they haven't been self-employed long enough, then they weren't entitled to grants. So, so people financially are feeling a massive effect. And I'm worried that people are going to start taking the law into their own hands, so to speak, and basically, be carrying out treatments or doing, PT sessions underhandedly just because they'll be that desperate for the financial support. So I think that, and then obviously the knock-on effect of things like that happening will be, get rid of that, will be, will sort of give the industry a bad name, so to speak, because of the things that people are going to, end up doing. I mean, I know there's already people that I've seen on social media that are already trying to advertise to open next week, and obviously they can't.
Mm. Well,
so
it is a
I do think it's going to have a negative effect. It is, but obviously, the rules are there for a reason. So with people not adhering to them, it's just gonna prolong, the world that, the sort of the pandemic that we're going through at the moment.
Now, every week on the podcast, we have a topical question. And whilst your business isn't an office-based business as much as many others, the question for this week is, what role do you think the office will play in the future of work, both within your own organization and the wider world?
Well, I mean, obviously, I do have a head office because with regards to the government funding, we process a lot of paperwork for it. So, I mean, one of the things I have already shifted to employees to become full-time home workers moving forward. Mm-hmm. So I do think that meetings, all the meetings have been held via Zoom now since March. So I think the office environment will definitely be completely different to what we used to class as the norm. So obviously with reduced numbers and hopefully for the better, I think productivity will increase with people being able to work from home and not having that travel. And then, obviously that people's commute should in theory hopefully be a bit better, because if there's more people working from home, there's less people on public transport and on the roads. So then it's, it's got a positive environmental impact as well. So I do envisage that it will be a completely different setup from what it was, before the pandemic. But as I said, the things that we've put into place is, home working. We've set, the desks in the office have been separated now, so people don't sit in clusters, they sit individually, and then working hours as well. So, and not everybody would start at 8:00. We've got people starting at 7, some people starting at 9 to sort of stagger entrance in and out of the building throughout the day.
What sort of effect do you believe that this is going to have on commercial real estate?
Well, there's already quite a lot of real estate that is actually coming back onto the market, and I know obviously I was looking at taking the premises on for a salon for apprenticeships, and the amount of properties that is available at the moment is quite astonishing. But I'm seeing adverts on a day-to-day basis now where obviously people. I saw a post yesterday about someone that had taken on a beauty salon in January, spent thousands of pounds doing it up, shut in March, and now they have to get rid of it because they're basically they don't have enough, they haven't generated enough income to pay for the next quarter of rent. So, and this is the point now where we're getting up to. I mean, what was this? We're talking like might be talking a good 3 months now where people won't have had any income whatsoever, and then from a landlord. On a rental point of view and things like that, and even people that have purchased commercial properties, they're just not, if they haven't had the support from the government, obviously there's some people that have felt, like Vita, for example, we completely outside of every window for a grant, so we weren't entitled to anything, so I've had not a single penny off the government, since COVID-19 started.
It is a very difficult time at the moment for all businesses.
I know. But that's, I've luckily enough because of, I've had access to, so I managed to furlough staff and this, that, and the other. So we've managed to get through it. But obviously there are other companies that aren't so fortunate. So I do think that obviously there will be a massive impact on the economy, and then on the back of that will obviously affect all the commercial rentals and purchases, because a lot of businesses will try and work from home, and will change the way that they strategically sort of manage their teams and the way that work's being delivered to reduce the amount of travel. So I do think it will have a massive effect moving forward.
Well, let's see how it happens, and it'll be interesting to follow this as the story progresses. But we should move on to the subject of leadership. I always like to start this part of the conversation off by asking the same simple question. What does the word leader mean to you?
Someone or a team would say that can sufficiently do the job that they are supposed to do. Someone that we entrust or expect to be able to, take us to the next level, or sort of provide that. What's the word I'm looking for? Probably. Let me think. I've lost the word now. I can't think of the word I was going to say.
Well, how would you describe your personal day-to-day leadership style?
Well, I work in a very small team, so we're very have an open door policy to make sure that everyone feels supported, and they can come to us with any issues or anything like that. We have everything from like weekly meetings. We do sort of like one-to-one to make sure that that any issues are addressed, the support's there, and then it's quite lucky that because we are a small team, it's a friendly small group, it's a good atmosphere. So it's that leadership sort of comes from myself and my two senior managers. We work quite closely together. We speak for a couple of hours every day, sort of doing the planning, and we involve all of the staff in everything that we do with regards to planning courses and additional support and new qualifications and, and new sites and new contracts and things like that. So it's just sort of to make sure that everybody feels like they, whatever they want to bring to the table, so to speak, that it is taken on board. We listen to everyone's opinion. We take any suggestions on board, and we let the team help build sort of the infrastructure with to a certain degree to make sure that everybody actually feels that they are part of the team, if that makes sense.
Now, where would you say that you developed your leadership style from? Did you have any role models who shaped you in this way?
I worked from being sort of 16, so I worked in restaurants. I worked in colleges and this, that, and the other. So I'd worked sort of all over the show. But to be honest, one of the inspirations was always my dad. My dad was worked from being sort of like 12, 13. And he'd worked his way up to be a general manager of a rather big fabrication firm. So it was always his ethic of, never calling in sick, always giving 110%. And that was sort of what was drilled into me as a young girl. So I think it was more of an inspiration from my dad rather than anybody sort of famous.
Well, it's always good to have those close-to-home influences. They seem to make more of an effect. Now, unfortunately, our time together is drawing to its close. But before I let you go, what does the next 12 months have in store for Vita Skills?
Well, we've obviously now from post-COVID-19, we've adapted our delivery now, so we're doing blended learning. So learners will be doing online. So we've devised a complete bespoke package where they have their own individual logins, so they can work through the course at their own speed. They have a tutor that contacts them each week, and they have the Zoom meetings. We post them kits as well. So if they do a makeup course with us, we send them out a makeup kit, nail kit, beauty kit, so on and so forth. So we've developed our own YouTube channel. We've also looked at increasing our apprenticeship delivery as well, because we have our own direct contract for apprenticeship delivery. So, and then last but not least, one of the big things that we're looking at doing at the moment is increasing our commitment to the sustainability. So I've sourced quite a lot of new products. So one company that I'm working very, very close with is they're called To Love My. So they're a UK brand, vegan-friendly products. Everything's made in the UK. They use recyclable products. So this is something that I'm now implementing into the range completely through Vita. From a sustainability point of view, we've transferred over in the process for each centre now to transfer over to the green energy to use 100% renewable energy. I've reduced travel across the board. So there's only staff that live in the areas that work in them specific sites, and then the team meetings now have been done via Zoom. And then obviously all the locally sourced products that we can get, because we also supply like milk for tea and coffee. We put fruit out in centres and things. So what we'll basically do there is obviously get them from the local farmers. So we've already started doing that at our head office and Media City thing before, obviously, COVID-19 happened. So once it's safe to do so, we will continue to do that as well.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the program, and I do hope we can have you back on when things get back to normal and we can be talking a bit more in depth about what you are up to at Vita Skills. Emma, Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care.
That was Emma Ridgeway, Managing Director of Vita Skills. And now, if you haven't heard it before, is my exclusive interview with our chairman, Lord Blunkett. Lord Blunkett, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's very good to be with you.
Well, of course, nothing is being said at the moment other than COVID-19, which we must touch on. What would your message be to small businesses who are trying to keep going?
Well, I think the last ones standing will be the ones that thrive when we get back to some sort of normality. So it's have confidence and courage. Obviously, take advantage as far as you can of the government help. I think that Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, has gone about as far as you could have expected in the circumstances. There are obviously small businesses that fall between the cracks. Those who don't have defined premises can't benefit from the business rate waiver, have not really been able to demonstrate that they can adhere to the PAYE for furloughing staff, and of course whether they can receive the grant, 10,000 or 25,000. All of those who can are obviously able at least to benefit from that for the time being and look to the future. But I think the second thing to say, and they don't need me to tell them this as a politician who did once do a business studies qualification, which is that it will be a different world, and being able to think about how that world will look in a year's time and be creative about it and learn from not just what's happening to you at this moment in time, but to others around you and the sector that you're working in, that will be really important.
Do you feel that the long-term effects of the COVID-19 outbreak will in some ways be positive for British industry?
Well, only in the sense that people are having to be creative, they're having to adjust and innovate. Therefore, they're thinking about more productive, if you like, greater productivity ways of delivering the same service or delivering the same products. And in that sense, I think we'll have temporarily at least very much higher unemployment than we've become used to, but we'll probably have a burst of productivity, which will help with the recovery. Whether it will help with the inequity of the way in which our economy is imbalanced, both between services and productivity and the production of goods and services, I'm not sure. What we will need to try and do is to ensure that the geographic imbalance that exists is, as far as humanly possible, is dealt with by both the entrepreneurship and innovation from the bottom up and targeted government help, which will still be needed. And we are now in the throes of the kind of borrowing that we saw back in 2008 to save the banking and economic system. We're having to do that to save the whole of our productive business and commerce, and I think that will have to be sustained for some time.
Do you feel that people will take a second look at global supply chains in the wake of this outbreak?
I think there's going to be much more creative ways of using local supply and linking up inside sectors much more effectively. And I hope that the Leaders' Council will be able to play a part in that, in the sense that people who have something in common, a synergy in terms of what they're delivering, whether it's a service or whether it's manufacturing or whatever, will be able to see that there's a good outcome from knowing the sector better, linking with people, not just geographically, locally, but those in this country who may not have been on the radar in terms of what they produced for the supply chain. And of course, ensuring, because there's quite a lot of fraud going on as we speak, with people getting into cyber attacks, that they'll also take account of going into the cybersecurity side effectively as well. The more we are online, the more people who are working from home, the more vulnerable those businesses and their supply chain become. And that's something to think about as well.
How important is strong leadership at the moment?
Well, I actually think that it's brought to the fore leadership in a whole range of areas, from obviously government itself, and there's been ups and downs with the Prime Minister's severe illness, but all the way through the public and private sector. People have, to use the jargon, stepped up, and they've shown local, regional, national level the kind of leadership that Britain historically was very good at. Regrettably, we've not seen the same on the international scene for all kinds of reasons, but maybe we will in future. So I think out of this will come experience of people who have seen an opportunity to do good, as well as seen an opportunity to provide a good service or goods, including, for instance, shortages for the health and social care system, the food chain and the like. But also, I think, in terms of seeing the synergy between the private and the voluntary sector, and using people's commitment to each other in a very positive way. I'm not sentimental about this. Things will revert. But actually, I think there's a kind of moment of moral judgment, of people feeling that they've got a role to play outside the immediate survival that they're engaged in. And if we can hang on to a little bit of that social responsibility, that will be a very positive outcome.
Absolutely. Now, what's your broad view of how the government is responding to this? Are you broadly supportive of their measures?
Well, it may surprise people to hear that I have been very supportive. Of course, there's been legitimate criticisms about the speed of response on protective equipment and on issues relating to testing. But my own view is very similar to the challenge that was made to the Prime Minister of Italy, when people said, why didn't you close Italy down faster? And he said, a fortnight before we did it, I would have been considered to be a madman, and nobody would have agreed to do it if I'd tried to move too quickly. And I think that's something that we need to reflect on here in the UK. We may have seen the signals elsewhere across the world and taken them more seriously at the time. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, but as someone who's had his life in the opposite political party to the present government, I think that with some hiccups and mistakes, they've not done a bad job in what has been incredibly difficult circumstances.
And you're absolutely right. In a liberal democracy that we live in, it's very difficult for people to swallow orders given to them from government.
Well, the UK and the US, and to some extent the Scandinavian countries, have a very different history and therefore interest in maintaining the freedom to decide and the persuasion and consent that's required. Those countries that have experienced one way or another totalitarianism over the last century have a slightly different way of coming at this. I don't want to exaggerate it, but I think that that's why getting the balance right of getting people to go along with what you want them to do in their interests as well as the nation as a whole is a sensible, proportional balance. And I think we now need to adjust to the coming out of the crisis gradually, readjusting to recovery in the same way.
Now, something you've mentioned recently on this balance is the police overreach in the enforcement of the COVID-19 structures that have been put in place. What have they done right, and where have they gone too far?
Well, I think that they were interpreting what was not necessarily as clear advice as it might have been for all kinds of reasons, because people were feeling their way. I think what's come out of it has been a demonstration by local police services in some parts of the country that they could get people to do what was needed without the heavy hand of drones overhead or people being told that they shouldn't be walking in the street, because this was all about self-isolation, not incarceration. It was about getting people not to pass the infection on to each other and therefore to provide distance rather than to make our lives a misery. Those police services that adopted that policing by consent and chivying people along did really well. Those who went over the top, I think, soon got a very substantial pushback. And one of the strengths of our democracy is that you could have that debate. People could say, I'm terribly sorry, we think the police force in our area has gone over the top. And that in itself is a constraint and a readjustment. That's another strength of living in a country where you can have opinions and express them without actually being thought to be a fool.
Now, of course, the government has faced criticism that they were slow to react, and Boris Johnson wasn't present at the early COVID-19 COBRA meetings. Now, Number 10 has claimed that this is normal practice. The health secretary often chairs COBRA meetings related to health. Does this tally with your experience as a Secretary of State, or would you have expected the PM to be more hands-on during the initial stages?
I think different prime ministers do have a very different style. And Boris's style, which I think will now be considerably adjusted, was very swashbuckling. In some senses, delegating is a good thing, as every leader of every business or public service knows. Those who try to pull too much into themselves end up with a massive bottleneck, great failure of trust, and the inability of people to show what they're worth and to demonstrate their capability. So I'd be very wary of jumping in and saying he was wrong to delegate the essential COBRA meetings. What I was surprised about was that he didn't chair the first couple, because my experience with Tony Blair for the 8 years I was in cabinet was that Tony was a great delegator, but he would get a grip to begin with, watch what the difficulties were, and then give people direction and confidence to be able to get on with it. So looking back, I think Boris himself probably thinks, God, I wish I'd spotted the signals from elsewhere in the world more rapidly, and I'd just been there. However, this also raises another issue. All of us in positions of leadership need good teams around us. I think after this is over, he will be assessing those who really did step up and those who demonstrated their inadequacy. I think we'll probably end up in a year's time with a much stronger cabinet than we have today.
Well, absolutely. And of course, we've seen a significant drop in the visibility of certain special advisors like Dominic Cummings during this entire period. So it'd be interesting to see how that pans out.
It's certainly readjusted the role of those behind the scenes with those who should be taking the decisions, having received advice. Obviously, there's been a complete transformation in the profile of experts, if I might use that term, who'd previously been denigrated. Scientists, medics, people with behavioral science understanding. My only criticism was, were we getting wide enough advice? Were we narrowing it too much to a couple of key centres in London? But that's because I've always been adverse to everything being London-centric. I think there's great expertise, wisdom, experience out in the sticks, and we should use it.
Rightly so. Now, was pandemic planning part of your time as a minister, particularly perhaps when you were Home Secretary?
Well, it was, but it was on the back of risk arising out of counter-terrorism measures.
Right.
I was the Home Secretary for 3 months when the attack took place in September 2001 on the World Trade Center and beyond. We did an enormous amount of scenario planning, both desktop and real. On the back of that, it was very heavily orientated to future developing terrorism risk. I certainly got involved with talking about pandemics. I remember being at a seminar in Edinburgh where the university there had done a lot of work itself on the issue of pandemics. And of course, we saw SARS and other things emerging. I think people have criticized the government for not picking up the report from 2015, 5 years ago. I think that what happens is human nature kicks in. You deal with what you're immediately faced with. You can sponsor reports, and this is true of business planning, of course, as well, and scenario planning for what business continuity will look like, recovery plans for business, what will happen if there's a cyber attack, what happens if there's an energy shutdown. These kind of things you can look at, but you're immediately turning your eyes to what's in front of you. And had we picked up a bit more on the danger from Ebola and SARS and what have you in the past, then we might have said, what if something hits us in the developed nations that we don't have a vaccine for, that we can't immediately whisk up protective materials or equipment, or for that matter, medicines that help with recovery, all of which we now see are a danger. I think this will make an enormous difference to the planning for the years ahead. I hope it will be widened so that we don't just look at what's happened, but very rarely do you see something exactly repeat itself. Some of the circumstances will be, but others won't. So that's why I've put emphasis in what I talk about on looking at the other virus, the cyber attack scenario, which could be just as dangerous in a world of just-in-time provision. One of the miracles of the modern developed world, except for the very poor, has been the distribution of food. A lot of it on computerized, technologically advanced systems. If that were to come down, we'd be in real trouble. So I think we need to think those sort of scenarios as well.
So have a full plan across both sectors, biological warfare, pandemics, and cyber warfare.
Yes, and to do so on different levels. I think, again, thinking global but acting local, we need a lot more to think about what would happen if something took shape that actually broke down those national and global chains and how we would cope. And without, obviously, we've got enough fear and anxiety to last a lifetime. Without creating even more anxiety, we can think about those things for the future in a more rational way, I think.
Now, aside from the physical threat of the virus, one of the things that people are vastly worried about is the effect on the economy, not just national economy, but also the world economy. Now, it has been said by certain parties, and I'd like to garner your thoughts on this. Is there a danger of the effects of the lockdown being even worse than those of the virus?
Were it be prolonged, I fear that balance would tip the other way. It is about proportionality. It is about balance. It's the wisdom of Solomon, really, to get the moment right when you start to move and then to move quickly. There's no doubt whatsoever that we are stocking up, not just on the economic and employment front, which will be devastating enough, but on the health and social well-being front, enormous challenges. And they will need careful handling because there's a lot of people whose lives, for a variety of reasons, are at risk in the future on a scale that we've been dealing with over the immediate handling of the pandemic, concentrating really hard on those affected by COVID-19, those sadly who have died or been seriously incapacitated. that will roll over into the economic, the social, the mental health and cultural well-being of the nation, and that will need all of us to pull together as well.
Absolutely. Now, do you believe the government's doing enough for business?
I think that the speed of reaction once the scale of the pandemic was clear was very good. I've praised Rishi Sunak for his action. Remember, a chancellor who only just come into office was planning to deliver the budget in the middle of March and has had at least three equivalent budgets since. I think he's handled it very well. Understandably worried now about what we're doing to our economy. The level of borrowing is sustainable because of low interest rates, but it reaches a point, of course, where it tips over so that you can't then do the kind of structural investment requirements that the government were laying out before and in the March budget. And those will have their consequences as well as a planned payback over many years. I think we've learned something over the last few months. We needed to take immediate action. We don't want another round of austerity equivalent from 2010 through to 2019. I don't think the nation, on the back of what's happened and the challenges we have, could take that. And therefore, we need a different plan, economic plan, over a much longer period, just as we did from the Second World War all the way through to 2002, when the final American loans were paid off.
Now, of course, one thing that's on everyone's lips, how much longer do you believe that the lockdown can go on for?
I believe that we need to be substantially back in action as an economy in June. This obviously is led in terms of places where people would meet in large numbers, having to adjust to the fact that it will be longer for them. And sadly, that will involve business closures. It's why the Chancellor extended the furlough scheme to the end of June. Mm-hmm. But unless we get things moving in June, I think we'll run into the summer where all kinds of services and industries will have a chain reaction effect. And what happens with one will then have a major impact on another. And then you get the skittle effect where things get knocked down that you hadn't perceived were going to be affected. So I very much, if I were in government, and I always think of things in that context, what would I do if I were in government? I would be on the side from the second week in May, on the side of the hawks in terms of saying we've got to start moving, and we've got to do so with the collaboration and cooperation of the public who have got the message, who did behave, who responded magnificently. Let's try and get back, perhaps, doing things differently for a time, but substantially getting back to business as usual. And unless we do that, then those areas that can't and wouldn't expect to be back in action immediately get pushed further into the middle of the year and the autumn, and then they become unsustainable.
Now, of course, one of the other major developments we've had recently are the changes in the Labour Party. So if we could just speak on the Labour Party for a while. This might sound like an obvious question, but how does Sakurai differ from Mr. Corbyn?
Well, I'm biased because I believe the Labour Party has come out of 4.5 years of a black hole of a nightmare, where it neither represented a credible opposition nor an electable government, and the combination was to let those who supported the Labour Party and needed some of its policies let them down very badly. Sir Keir Starmer both is a highly intelligent, professional lawyer who, as Director of Public Prosecutions, led the service well, had to take difficult decisions at a time of austerity, understands the world beyond Labour members, but has been able to do business with those who originally supported Jeremy Corbyn and was able to command support from them. His creation of a balanced shadow ministerial team has been very encouraging. I supported Lisa Nandy, who he's made shadow foreign secretary, because I thought she understood the north of England and the disaffected former Labour voters. But I believe that Sakurai has taken on board those who have something really sensible to offer, and I believe he will be both a great leader of the opposition. More importantly, he will then present himself as a credible alternative prime minister. And all governments need an alternative government at their shoulder. It was true of us from 97, and it took the Conservatives some time to recover and to get to that position, but they did, and the Labour Party will, and that's crucial for our democracy. All of us need to understand and appreciate that a living, breathing, functioning democracy requires a credible, confident, and in many ways supportable opposition, as well as a government that we clearly want to do well, because none of us want, as we didn't with the COVID crisis, none of us want the government to fail. We want to see our economy recover. We want our social well-being to be taken into account. We want to overcome deep-seated inequality and poverty, and we want to do it with enterprise and entrepreneurship and business playing their role. And that is about leadership nationally, locally, in the private and the public sector, people with ideas, with confidence, with the ability to pull teams around them, above all, to have some idea of what it is they want to achieve and a very good idea as to how to achieve it.
Now, of course, one of the biggest problems Sakurai is facing will be tackling the party's anti-Semitism problem. There has been a recent internal report that has been quite damning. What's your response to that report, and what does Sakurai need to do in response?
Well, there are two reports. One which is being produced by the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which he will, and has already indicated, will implement in full. The second was a leaked report put together by the supporters of Jeremy Corbyn, 800 pages of private interchanges on social media, which he has, Keir Starmer, set up an investigation to identify who did it, who leaked it, what the content was, does it have any salience and lessons for us, and where necessary, action will be taken. So I hope that as he moved very quickly to reassure the Jewish community, so he will be able to take the necessary steps to back up that reassurance with the kind of actions that says that this was a blight on a historic great political party that all of us were ashamed of. We've been able to put that behind us and to move on to facing the future with confidence.
What's the one key thing that Sakurai needs to do to restore Labour as an election-winning party?
I think Sir Keir Starmer's major challenge is to convince sceptical voters that Labour has not only reverted to a party that they can support because they can see it acting, developing, presenting as a credible alternative government, but also that the lessons have been learned from the fiasco from 2015 onwards. In other words, there have to be very clear signals of substantial change, not just the right words, not just reassurance that we're not going back to some of the crazier policies, but actually that we've understood why the electorate rejected those policies so substantially in December 2019. If people get that message, they'll understand that the Labour Party has changed, as it did in the 1980s and early 90s, to become the electable government with the greatest majority in historic majority, even greater than 1945, which I was privileged to be able to take advantage of in 1997 when I joined the cabinet.
Now, I know what your answer is going to be to this question, but indulge me. Do you think Sakurai has what it takes to be PM?
Yes, I do. I think he has the background, he has the experience, he has the professionalism, he has the forensic mindset, and he has the confidence to have put a team around him which will ensure that it will work. And those elements are true of all leaders. Ideas, the ability to build a team, to have confidence in that team, and to be able to demonstrate leadership in practice, sometimes at the most difficult times. And, the Leaders' Council, those sharing their thoughts with the kind of thing that we're doing now with a podcast, but also joining us in linking up in that network of people who can support and help each other and learn from each other. That is what needs to be done in politics as it needs to be done in business. Thank you very much indeed, Matthew.
Well, thank you for coming on the program. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you very much, and good luck to all those listening in what has been a nightmare scenario. Good luck for the future. Have courage, have confidence, and yes, listen to those who know more about business than I ever will.
Thank you, Lord Blunkett.
Thank you.
This has been the Leaders' Council podcast. Thank you for celebrating excellence in leadership with us. I have been your host, Matthew O'Neill. Until next time, goodbye. Thank you for listening to our podcast. The views expressed within the podcast do not reflect the views of the Leaders' Council of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, its parent company or subsidiaries, members of staff, other guests, or any other person therein associated.